Hi there, I'm Alex and welcome back to Ukes with Alex, the ukulele channel that looks a bit like the Southern Ukulele Store channel and certainly sounds a bit like the Southern Ukulele Store channel. But this is my channel, and on my channel we do things a bit more randomly and a bit more sporadically. We're not looking at instruments that are for sale here. I'm actually here today just to give you some tips and tricks for the next time you look to buy a ukulele, which is something that I really hope you're looking to do soon, because I do work for a store. But please do note, this is relevant to anyone shopping anywhere and represents the 10 things that I think most customers come in to our store to shop or shop over us online or on the phone without this prior information. Tip number 1, know your size. Before you phone up the shop or you come in or you order online, do some research about what ukuleles you like the sound of. Don't type expensive ukulele into YouTube if that's not what you're looking to buy. Don't type expensive ukulele into Google if that's not what you're looking to buy. But search for concert ukuleles, tenor ukuleles, baritones, sopranos, sopranissimos. Search for the different sizes of ukulele and listen to some videos and really absorb what it is you want from that instrument, because so many people go, I don't really know what size I want, I just know when I know. And that's fine, but quite a few of those same people are the same people that buy and sell instruments regularly, and I know that if you're buying your first instrument or your second instrument, it's really important that you find something you bond with, or there's a risk that you're not going to stick with the instrument long term. Key things to note with size. Lots of people are worried about buying a tenor because it might be too big, and lots of people are too worried about buying a soprano because it's too small. And because of that, the concert size has really risen in popularity, and I would say the concert size is, where I work at the Southern Ukulele Store, is the size that most people begin on. It's a good size to start on, but please do not be completely put off by buying a slightly bigger instrument or a slightly smaller instrument, because unless you have obvious obstacles to overcome, for example, if you have massive hands, a soprano probably isn't for you. And if you have very, very small hands, a tenor possibly isn't for you. But the nut width on many of these instruments is the same, and it's just the overall length that's different. So there are other factors at play other than just how the instrument's going to look when you're holding it. Plenty of people out there play jumbo guitars. I mean, if you look at Dolly Parton, there's plenty of videos of Dolly Parton playing a Gibson J200, which is the biggest sized body acoustic guitar out there. And the same kind of demystifying needs to happen with the ukulele, because if you're a finger picker, you're going to love the sound of a tenor. And if you're a strummer, you're probably going to love the sounds of the sopranos and the concerts slightly more. So that's the first thing to do. Research the size of the ukulele that you want before buying. That plays really nicely into number 2. Number 2, which is know your hands. If you have big hands, then perhaps don't look at sopranos for your first instrument. If you have really tiny hands, perhaps don't look at tenors or baritones for your first instruments. But make note of any ukuleles that you look at. Look at the listings on websites, or ask the people in the shop that you're visiting. Ask them what the nut width is, because typically there are 2 or 3 different common nut widths of the ukulele, but I'm going to simplify it to 2 to start with. You have a 35mm nut width and a 38mm nut width. Now, to look at that, you can kind of see a difference, and obviously I'm not measuring it with a ruler, but the 35mm nut width is what 90% of the ukuleles under £500 will have. So a 35mm nut width has a typical string spacing of between 27 and 29 millimeters. The string spacing is fairly standard across different sizes, so a soprano would have the same nut width and same string spacing as a tenor, or possibly even a baritone. And if you're finding that when you're holding a small ukulele, the problem isn't making the chord, the problem is squeezing your hands together in the space, then that's the time to look at a bigger size. But if you find that the distance between the strings is not a problem for you, then don't feel like moving up to a tenor will change that, because it's not necessarily that straightforward. If you're going to come into a shop and try them, just ask the people about nut widths, and they should know. If you go to a specialist retailer, and there are plenty of them out there, they should be able to kind of guide you by the size of your hands. Okay, number 3, don't buy with your eyes. We've all done it. I've done it. I can see you right now. You've done it. You're smiling. You've done it too. You buy something based on how it looks, and you ignore whether it's the right thing for the job. I've done it. I'm not ashamed to say that I once couldn't decide which car to buy between two cars, and I chose the one that was the colour I wanted, and it was the wrong decision. We've all done it. So the same science, the same ideology needs to be applied to when buying a musical instrument. There are plenty of reasons, hundreds of different reasons why manufacturers use certain tone woods over other tone woods. And there are reasons that the really exotic, really quirky, affordable instruments are made of laminate woods. And quite often it's because they are not the best tone wood in the world, and by laminating them, they're actually improving them. So when you go into a shop, or when you narrow your shortlist down to 4 or 5 instruments, if you have something there that's solid mahogany, something there that's laminate acacia, something there that's really quirky camphor burl, and then something that's ash that's really quilted, you need to look at those instruments and say, well, what kind of sound do I want? Because quite often, if you want that traditional warm smoky sound, you do need to be looking at those first 2 options. You need to be looking at that mahogany really, or that acacia, because if you buy that camphor burl or that ash ukulele that are laminates, they're going to sound bright. And that will play into something that I'll bring up later on in this video. But once you've got the wrong instrument, it's very, very hard to make it the right instrument. Changing the strings isn't going to make all the difference. So you need to buy the right instrument at the time. And sometimes that will mean making a compromise between whether the look matches the sound that you want. And this plays right up to the high end too. And it's the main reason that so many ukuleles are made of Hawaiian koa. It's because Hawaiian koa is gorgeous, but it also has that bell-like sweet sound. It's the sweet point where a tone wood matches the look. It looks as it sounds. But many people do not like spruce top ukuleles or cedar top ukuleles because they look too much like tiny guitars. And yet, if you want something that will project, something that has a very balanced and very transparent modern sound, then a spruce or a cedar top is probably the better choice for you. Now, I'm just suggesting this to you, and I've owned plenty of the wrong instrument before I found the right ones, and it's definitely the most common thing where people come into the shop and we have a really good discussion about what they want, and I get 4 or 5 instruments lined up for them. And then they see something on the wall that's completely unsuitable, and they buy it. And I don't go away thinking they've made the wrong decision, but 6 months later they trade it in and buy that first ukulele they could have bought on day one. So that's why that is tip number 3. Okay, number 4, have a budget in mind and learn what's available under your budget and over your budget. It's fun to research. Not all of us want to go into a shop and spend lots and lots of time looking at 100 different instruments and then just going, how much is that? How much is that? How much is that? If you do that research and you get in your head what it is you want to spend beforehand, that will help the shop no end. I used to feel, before I worked in music shops, I used to feel like every shop is just after your money. But actually, in the modern world where consumers have so many rights, I think that perception and certainly that attitude is just not present in the modern world. Certainly in the UK, I can't speak for other countries, but if you go into a specialist shop, they would always rather that you spent £50 less, but buy an instrument that you're going to really stick with and then leave them a good review. We would much rather pair you up with the right instrument than the wrong instrument. And that seems so obvious, and it's very easy for me to say, but it's so true. And that's the reason that where I work at Southern Ukulele Store, that's the reason we've developed so many signature models over the years. It's because we have lots of people come in who want a particular sound at a particular budget, and they couldn't find quite the right instrument, so quite often they were spending a lot more. And they were a bit resentful of that, or they were spending a lot less and not getting something at the standard they want. So if you research your budget, and for those asking, I would say that as I film this in 2021, a good budget for a beginner would be £100 to £150. If you're looking at buying a second ukulele, I would say a good budget would be £150 to £400. And if you can afford more than that, then you should spend it, because you will always feel like you shortchanged yourself. And if you can't afford it, then don't overstretch, but maybe maybe don't buy a cheaper instrument to make do. Maybe take that extra week to save up that extra £10. Just make sure that you don't do yourself a disservice by buying something that's cheaper than your own taste and standards, or something that really overstretches you to the point where you become resentful and you sell the instrument, which is something that I've seen many times over the years. So what's happened in recent years, I've noticed, is a trend where people go, I want to spend £200, and then the right instrument for the job is $209.99, and people go, I bet they'll haggle. But that's not always possible. If you look at the pricing, $209.99 online may be the cheapest price. So what are you going to do? Are you going to go, I'm not going to spend that extra £10? And then you're going to buy something that's £180, take it home, open it up, and then subconsciously go, I should have spent £30 more, but I'm sticking to my guns. That's something I've seen many people do, and all the power to you. If that's who you are, that's great. But I definitely feel like more people get value for money by waiting and buying the right instrument. Okay, we're already up to number 5. Number 5 is don't buy into the brand. Now, it's very easy for me to say that as I sit here wearing my Gap jumper and my Chicago Bulls hoodie, but we can get carried away with a brand name, and our expectations are heightened by the brand name being on the headstock or in the sound hole on the label, and that's not always the case. Just because something has a 120-year history doesn't necessarily mean that what they're building today is the out-and-out best thing that's ever been produced. There are plenty of brands out there like that, and there are plenty of brands where consistency is key. I will name names in one instance. Kamakas build instruments today that are better than the instruments they built 60 years ago, and on a par with the instruments that they built 100 years ago. I'm trying incredibly hard not to slag off particular brands here, because I feel like it would be incredibly damaging to me personally and to the shop I work for, but I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. If you see a particular brand and you Google it and they come up and they make a ukulele and you think, brilliant, they're excellent, they're an excellent brand, I've heard of them, and then you just take a look at the shops that actually sell that particular instrument and note that ukulele retailer specialists like Southern Ukulele Store, World of Ukes, Eagle Music, they're not stocking that particular brand, then have a think about what the other options out there are. Sometimes though, we are all guilty of just wanting the brand name, but just make sure it's the right brand name and make sure that you didn't pay too much of a premium to get it. Number 6, moving on from what I just said, buy from a specialist retailer if you can. The one thing I think I answer more than anything on the phone every single day of my life is, do you set the ukuleles up before they go out? Yes, we do. Because if we just shifted things out of a box, we wouldn't be any better than Amazon, or we wouldn't be any better than many of the big box shifting retailers. If you look at a website, or if you look to visit a shop and you see that they don't have a front-facing shop space or a facility for you to visit, or any kind of about us page where they detail what they do to instruments, it's quite safe to assume that they are just getting them from a supplier, perhaps just making sure there's no cracks and then throwing it out. But ukuleles need a setup, they need tweaking. I would say 9 times out of 10 an instrument benefits from about 20 minutes on a workbench. Maybe 1 time out of 10 instruments benefit from up to an hour on a workbench. And if you have special needs or requirements, like you're left-handed and you need a uke converted, you need a strap button fitted, you need the action lowered or the action heightened, or you need machine heads tweaked, or you need the nut adjusted, all of these things can be done by a specialist retailer. This kind of thing doesn't just apply to ukuleles. You can use this rule in everyday life, and we probably do. If you're going to buy things, buy them from a specialist where you can. If you were going to buy fishing supplies, you'd go to a fishing shop. If you were going to buy tyres, you would go to a tyre shop. It's the same with buying a musical instrument. I regularly tell people not to buy banjos from us because we don't know about banjos. We don't sell a great deal of banjos. The ones we do are ones that we have a very specialist knowledge of. And I recommend people all the time to Andy Banjo, which is a banjo specialist, because if I was buying a vintage banjo, I would want somebody that knew about vintage banjos to fix it and make sure that it was what I needed. And it's exactly the same when buying a new ukulele. Okay, we're on to number 7 already, which is a really hard one. This is future-proof yourself. When you're buying the instrument, think about what you are going to do with it. If you are somebody that is listening to Jake Shimabukuro all day, and then you listen to it on your headphones in the evening when you're at the gym, and then you go to bed with Jake Shimabukuro's version of While My Guitar Gently Weeps in your head, and then you go and you buy your first ukulele and you buy a spruce top soprano, and then you're upset because it doesn't intonate how you want and it doesn't resonate or ring out like Jake's uke, that's fine. No one's expecting you to go out and buy a 4-gram Kamaka, but perhaps you should have bought a tenor. Perhaps you should have just thought about kind of what you're going to play on the instrument a bit more, because it's very easy to say, well, I'm going to buy a ukulele that does a bit of everything, and so for some people that works. I highly recommend ukes that are dynamic and do a bit of everything to people all the time. But if you have a specialist interest within the already niche world of the ukulele, just future-proof yourself as much as you can and discuss it with us. I work at Southern Ukulele Store. You can contact us in store, have a chat with one of the guys there, or ring Eagle Music or Mim's Ukes, or the guys at Hawaii Music Supply, or there's so many different people out there that have extensive knowledge of the different instruments available to you. Use their experience and just make sure that you buy the right instrument for yourself at the right time. Okay, number 8, make a day of it. Now this one is a bit more fun, and I'm going to give you 2 very specific examples, and I feel like this will really help you. If you are planning on visiting a shop to buy a musical instrument and you've saved up a lot of money to buy it, and this is a very special day for you, make sure that you do not ruin it for yourself. And I've seen it happen so many times, and I've done it myself before. I'm going to give you 2 very specific examples. I once had a man knock on the door at 8:15 in the morning as I was filming one of these videos for the Southern Uke Store, and he was banging away, and I went and saw him, and he was sopping wet, very angry, miserable, because he'd left Bedfordshire at 4 o'clock in the morning to come here to the shop for when we opened. He'd arrived early, he hadn't bought a coat, and for whatever reason he decided to park quite a long way away, walk in the pouring rain, even though he knew we weren't open. He hadn't had breakfast. He was in just the wrong mood to absorb what he was spending his money on, and he came in and he couldn't decide what he wanted, and he went away without something. But then about 3 hours later he came back in and he was all smiles. He'd had some breakfast, he'd gone and bought a coat from a charity shop along the high street when they opened, and he'd gone for a walk along the cliff top, and he came back and he said, yeah, I'm really sorry, I just wasn't in the right mood earlier. And all of that stuff could have been avoided if he had just kind of had breakfast before he came and paced himself a bit more. But sometimes in the eagerness to come in and try musical instruments, and you have this idea in your head of what you're going to do, you can forget to do key things that will help you in your decision making. So I've done it myself. I once drove to Farnham from Bournemouth, which is about an hour and 20 minutes, to try a musical instrument. I'd saved up a lot of money to buy it, and then this shop in Farnham were the only shop in the UK that had one. And I drove there. I paid £4 or £5 to park in the Waitrose car park. No breakfast, there for when they open. Walk in, they didn't have the guitar. They'd sold it overnight on the website. I checked the night before and they had it. I hadn't checked in the morning. And it's quite important to ring these shops up and get them to put something aside for you and make sure that they've got it, because I was really cheesed off at that shop in that moment. And I got them to order me another one, and I waited 3 months and it came, and then I paid for shipping. All in all, I paid for petrol, parking and shipping, and I didn't keep the instrument for very long because I didn't try it first. I didn't make the right call. So I think I've made my point quite well, but yeah, just make a day of it. If you're gonna be buying a special instrument, make it a special day if at all possible. Okay, number 9. Number 9 is nice and simple. Buy a stand. If you're buying your first ukulele and you are wanting to learn and you're very eager, don't buy a hard case or buy some kind of difficult to use gig bag, because if you put that instrument in the bag or in the case, it's out of sight and it's out of mind. If you don't have pets running around or young children that can pull it off or something and hurt themselves, then get a stand. They're about £10. Put the instrument on the stand, and then every time you walk past it, I guarantee you're going to want to pick it up and play it. That's how you become better as a player. You get better as a player by making the time for that instrument, even if that time is just 30 seconds of strumming while you're waiting for your pasta to cook, or you're waiting for, I don't know, for your computer to load up. There's a million different ways that you can practice. Some people can put aside hours a day, some people can't. But if you put the instrument in the case, or you put it in a gig bag and then you put it on top of a shelf, it's going to stay there until you put time in your diary. Whereas if you have it available to you at all times, it's going to be available to you at all times. Okay, hopefully you're still with me for number 10. Strings do not make the wrong instrument right. If you have a ukulele and you've tried it and you've made a decision to buy it, but you're finding that it's too mellow, or it's too thick, or it's too overbuilt, it's too wrong in your hands, then these pieces of magical plastic are not going to dramatically change it. They're going to make small incremental differences to the finished product. So strings are a bit like icing on the cake. The cake is going to taste slightly different, but it's still a cake. A carrot cake's not going to taste like a chocolate cake, and a chocolate cake's not going to taste like a carrot cake because you put different frosting on the top. It really is that simple. There's no denying that if you're buying a ukulele and it has clear fluorocarbon strings on and you find that it's too mellow, changing to a black nylon string is not going to make it less mellow. It will make it more mellow. But you cannot make 80% of the difference from an instrument with a set of strings. And if you read in music forums that, I changed the strings and it made all the difference, that's a personal thing, and it probably did change that person's perception of the instrument. But do not buy the wrong instrument and then expect the strings to correct that for you. I've had customers spend £200-300 in a single order on different strings for a ukulele that they spent £200-300 on, and then I see that instrument go up for sale on Facebook Marketplace because it's just not what they're looking for. A good final example I can give you is that I regularly have the same conversation with customers who are buying a uke. They're going, okay, I'm going to buy this Kawaya. Could you please fit Worth Browns to it? And I go, okay, we can, but do you not want to try the factory strings? They say, no, all my ukuleles have Worth Browns on. That's fine. For some people, that is exactly what they want. But how are you going to know, if you haven't tried the factory strings, how that instrument should be? If you're going to put Worth Browns on it, then it is going to inherently have that kind of frosting on top of the cake. Anyway, folks, I really hope this video has been helpful. If you're a beginner or an intermediate player, please do add your tips and tricks to new buyers in the comments section. I'd love to have a discussion about this, and I hope you don't mind me putting this on my Ukes with Alex channel rather than the Southern Uke Store channel. I just feel like I can be more kind of open to my own experiences on my channel, rather than kind of focusing on what we sell, as is my job when doing the Southern Ukulele Store channel. If you have any questions, you can email me ukesofalex@gmail.com. But in the meantime, folks, have a good day and thanks very much.